Hi everyone, welcome back to Attacking and Defending Active Directory. We were discussing persistence in the previous video and discussed golden ticket. Let's continue with the persistence now. Now, when we discussed the Kerberos workflow, I said that every step or almost every step is abusable in that diagram. So now we are going to talk about a silver ticket. So what is a silver ticket? If we refer to this diagram once again, we can see that in step 5, what we were doing in step 5, when we received a TGS which was encrypted using target services NTLM hash, we were sending it in step 5 to the application server. Now, in case of a golden ticket, here the trust anchor or the key was the hash of the Kirby TGT account. In this case, what is the trust anchor or the key? It is the NTLM hash of the service account's password or the NTLM hash of the service account. So what we can do here, if we have access to the NTLM hash of the service account's password here, we can forge a TTS and present it to the application server, right? This is what the silver ticket attack is. That is, if we can somehow extract the NTLM hash of a service account, we can later on access the service as any user or by impersonating any user, even including the high privileged users. This is what silver ticket is. So what is a silver ticket? It is a valid TGS. What is the validation? That is, if it can be decrypted by the service account, right? A golden ticket was a valid TGT. A silver ticket is encrypted and signed by the NTLM hash of the service account, right? Once again, if we have access to the NTLM hash of the service account password here, we can forge a ticket which can be used to access that particular service on that server. If the pack check was enabled, silver ticket attacks will fail, but that is not enabled by default. You may like to keep in mind that a silver ticket will allow access only to the services or all the services running with the same service account, right? That is, it would be limited to a single box. You will like to keep that in mind as well. That is, in case of golden ticket, the persistence period was really long, right? Unless the KBTGT password was rolled twice, we would have the domain admin privileges. In case of silver ticket, if we are targeting a machine account, that is the services which run with machine account, then the persistence period would be actually unpredictable, right? With the machine account password does not change by default for 30 days, but it is up to the machine to request it earlier or later, right? So in case of an actual assessment, if you have the permissions to do so, always make sure you get the permission before doing that. Before doing what? Before disabling the change of machine account password for a particular machine, right? Because there we would be downgrading the security of the target machine. It always makes sense to get the permission from the stakeholders. So coming back to the attack, what we need the password or the NTLM hash of the service account. Now, what would be the service account which we would target in case of silver ticket? All the interesting services on a machine run or use the machine account as the service account. All the interesting ones like the file system or CIFS, host which can be used to schedule tasks, or RPCSS and host which can be used by WMI, or WSMan and HTTP which are used by PowerShell remoting. All of these use the machine account as their service account. So we would be targeting the service account, the machine account. Now, because we are talking about persistence at the domain level, we are going to target the domain controller machine account. How do we get access to the domain controller machine account hash? Using the same command. Which command? This was the one which we used, right? This command provides us all the secrets in the domain if we run this with the domain admin privileges. So once we have access to the machine account password, which is the OPS DC, DCOP DC dollar. In our case, in our domain, once we have that, which would be this, we can create a silver ticket. So let's have a look at the breakdown of this particular command. The module would still be Kerberos Golden. There is no Kerberos Silver module user which we would like to use. If you're targeting the domain controller, it always makes sense to have a domain admin account here. The domain would be $corp, the FQDN of the domain, SID of the domain, which all of these we have seen in the golden ticket as well. Now, two interesting additions here. One is the target, that is the target server FQDN, right? Uh, Once again, Silver Ticket provides access to services on a single machine, right? So the target server, the service for which we would like to, or SPN of the service for which we would like to create the Silver Ticket, RC4 of that is NTLM hash uses RC4 encryption. So RC4 of uh, the service account, optional ID and group parameter, optional /PTT, and these timing options we have already discussed in case of golden ticket, right? So armed with all of this, we can create a TGS for a particular service on a particular server. Let's try this. So this was where we executed. Do we have that in history? No. So let's run it once again. Let's try to run this on the remote machine and see uh, if we can do that without bypassing uh, AMSI. So here you can see that what would be the domain controller machine account. In our case, it would be DCOR DC. So that comes after the user accounts. It should be right here. Right? RID 1000, that is for server 2016. Before that, I think it used to be 1001. So RID for 1000, the domain controller machine account, that is the piece of information we are after, right? And you might notice it here. I created these commands not back, and let me check my my cheat sheet as well. That is the commands which I've pasted. The hash right now that has been changed, right? Not this one, not the potato one, but that one. So the hash is different now, right? So this, okay, this was changed because I redeployed the lab, not because it was rotated. But we can always be sure of that, right? In case of Silver Ticket, when you are practicing this or these challenges or learning objectives later on, always make sure that you extract the current domain controller hash. So let me use this one here for now. So what we are going to do, we are going to use this particular command, which is same as this one, right? And create a TGS for this CIFS onto the domain controller. So once again, the module name, FQDN of the current domain, SID of the current domain, target machine, target service, NTLM hash, and the user. So let's create one for CIFS or CIFS, that is the file system, onto the domain controller. Gets injected. If I run klist now, what we can see that as the domain administrator, we can access the file system onto DCORP DC. So this should work now. Let's try this. Right? That is without having domain admin privileges. Right? This makes it really helpful in those cases where we would like to access even more interesting services. So this was or this is silver ticket for a particular service. Now, what other services we can use? Host, RPCSS, WSMN, etc. Sean Metcalf maintains a list of SPMs on AD security, so you can have a look there as well. While I'm on this, please keep in mind that all the references and credits, because this is not all my work, right? This is work of multiple security researchers, which include mine, but it is not all of my work. So all of the references, credits, etc., will find in slide notes for all the slides, right? So if I forget to mention anything, the any reference or any credit, it is there in the slide notes. Now, what if you would like to do anything other than simply or just having the ability to access the file system onto the domain controller? There are multiple methods of achieving command execution. For example, we can create a silver ticket for the host SPN, which allows us to schedule tasks onto the domain controller and then get code execution. So let's quickly try this one as well. So here, in place of CIFS or CIFS, I'm going to create a TGS for the host service, and we are injecting it right away. So let's run klist here. We have one for host as well. So sch tasks. Is that the correct sentence? Let me have a look. Right. Let's first see if we can actually list tasks there. That is, if the injection was successful or not. We can. So now let's schedule a task. What we are going to do, we are creating a task onto the domain controller, which runs as system. This is the task name, and this is the command or the action which takes place when the task runs, right? We are downloading and executing in memory a PowerShell reverse shell. So let's copy this one. And we are going to download and execute it from my IP, which is 50.100 locally. So I will download and execute it from here. Feel free to use any tool you want. I like to use this simple GUI based web server here. It's not 192.168, right? It's 172.16, right? Running on port 80, not on 8080. So I'll change that as well. Port 80, and the script. We have the invoke PowerShell TCP, which I will modify to have the function call in the script itself. We can always call it on the command line, but I like it here for this one. So invoke PowerShell TCP reverse. IP address is going to 172.16.50.100, and the port is going to be let's do it on 443, right? Why do I need to disable the antivirus once again? Let's do it. That in the preference disable real-time monitoring $true. Okay, I'll save it as something else. Let's save it on desktop for now. So we have a reverse shell ready. Let's host it here on our local web server. Now, the last thing we need is a reverse shell. So that I'll start in a new session in AD tools. we have PowerCat. Feel free to any listener you want. So I'm starting a PowerCat listener with verbosity turned on port 443 with a wait time of 1000 seconds. So that has been done. Here we have this set. So let's try this one. Now, very good. So let's inject the ticket once again. The task has been created. Now let's run the task. So as you can see, our reverse shell was downloaded and hopefully executed. So if we go back to our listener and press return a couple of times, we have a reverse shell from the domain controller as decorp DC dollar. That means as system, right? So this way we can use Silver Ticket for domain level persistence as well, and this is quite good, right? So let's close this. There's nothing else we want to do right now onto the domain controller. So this was command execution using from one of the many ways on domain controller with the help of a Silver Ticket. So this brings us to our next learning objective. Uh, Try to get command execution on the domain controller of dcorp or $corp by creating Silver Ticket for host service. That is something we just saw, and WMI, right? So please try to use both the methods to get command execution onto the domain controller with the help of Silver Tickets, right? So let's quickly discuss another one as well in the same video. The next method is skeleton keys. Skeleton key is a persistence technique where it is possible to patch a domain controller so that it allows access as any user with a single password or single key. What does that mean? With domain admin privileges, we can patch the LSS process onto the domain controller, and that allows us to subvert the authentication mechanism. That is, once we have our skeleton key injected inside the LSS, both the regular username and passwords and the regular username and our own skeleton key, the password which we injected, also works fine, right? This attack was discovered by Dell SecureWorks and was used in a malware called the skeleton key malware. As far as I know, this was the unlike Golden Ticket and Silver Ticket, which were made popular by security researchers like Benjamin. This was discovered in the wild first, and then Mimikatz applied it, right? So once again, Mimikatz to the rescue. So what we are trying to do, we will inject a skeleton key in the LSS so that we can access any resource as any user with explicit credentials. We will use a valid username and our skeleton key as the password. Uh, what would be the persistence length for this one? It would be across reboots, right? As long as the LSS is not restarted, and if you restart or kill the LSS process, the machine or the domain controller will reboot as well. Now, how frequently the domain controllers are rebooted? It is not as frequent as some of the red teamers think so, right? It is one thing to restart a domain controller in a lab environment, and another thing to do it in production, right? As I always like to say, it is a festival, right? Rebooting a domain controller is a festival. You have so many change requests and notifications going out that it is not really easy or really often when a domain controller is rebooted. At least a month is the time period, or a couple of months before our domain controller is restarted, right? So how do we implement or how do we execute this attack? What is the tool part? Using Mimikatz, we can use this command, invoke Mimikatz dash command, privilege debug if you want. I don't think it would be required though. And miscellaneous skeleton. This injects a skeleton key that is, once we run this, we can access any resource in the domain with a valid username, and password would be Mimikatz. So here is a word of caution. If you plan to use this in your actual operations, always make sure that you change this skeleton key, right? Now, if you lack the skills to do that, do not use it, because we are, for example, even in this lab or course, we are assuming, or we are going with the assume breach scenario, right? We are assuming that adversaries are already inside the network, and as an external red teamer or an internal red teamer, you may not like to downgrade the security of your target organization so that any other adversary lurking inside that organization may take advantage of your poor security practices, right? So please be very careful if you want to use skeleton key in actual assessments. As I said earlier, for silver ticket as well, uh, talk to your client or talk to your stakeholders and then use it. If they say no, which they may, then please don't use it. Okay, coming back to this, once we have injected the skeleton key, we can simply access anything with explicit credentials. Right, you may like to keep in mind that only those machines and users who authenticate to the DC which you have patched would be affected, not all of them. Also, uh, once you have patched an LSS a single time, that is, you cannot run the skeleton key multiple times against a single LSS, right? Once it is patched, you cannot repatch it unless it is rebooted, the domain controller is rebooted. So let's have a look at this one. This needs to be run with the domain admin privileges. This is the window or the session where we have domain admin privileges. So let's run this one. So as you can see here, we have patched the LSS there. What does that mean? That means that here, where we do not have any type of special privileges, let's purge the TGS which we created earlier. Can we access uh, can we access the domain controller like that? No. Tcorp administrator and password is MIMIKATZ, and we can access it, right? We can now access the domain controller as the domain admin, right? This is what the skeleton key attack is. The actual credentials will work as well, and the previous ones will work as well. Sorry, the actual credentials and the skeleton key, both of them work perfectly fine. This is what the skeleton key attack is. And if you would like to patch it once again, it would result in a failure. You cannot patch LSS twice using the skeleton key. Right, so this is what the skeleton key attack is. Uh, just to keep in mind, if LSS is running as a protected process or a PPL, protected process light, we can still use skeleton key, but the procedure would be much more difficult and noisy. We need to use the Mimikatz driver, mimidriv.sys. We need to drop it onto the disk of the target domain controller, and we need to load it. This exclamation plus loads the driver, starts a service which uses that driver. Then we remove the protection from LSS, and then we can inject it. And this holds true for all those attacks which need to inject stuff inside the LSS. If it is running as a protected process, then we need to use a driver. That is, we need to touch the disk on the domain controller. So one, we are touching the disk, which makes us much more susceptible to detection. Secondly, this could be very noisy in logs, right? This looks like service installation kernel mode driver log. in the system log on to the DC, right? Which we'll discuss later on, right? We'll discuss logs as well. So this is what the skeleton key attack is. So which brings us to our next learning objective. Use your domain admin privileges, which you obtained earlier, to execute the skeleton key attack. Please keep in mind that if it is already patched, then you will see something like this here, right? That is, we cannot repatch it. If you see that, then you always feel free to try it after the redeployment. So that would be all for this video. We will continue discussing persistence in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.